everybody, and welcome to Books Unbound, the podcast where we unbind books, specifically this week one book, to get to its heart with your hosts, us, Ariel, and
Raylene. Hello.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Hope you're well. We read the most disturbing book of our lives.
Whoa. Dramatic headline.
Say it ain't so, Raylene. Say it ain't so.
I mean, it's true. We spent basically not our entire weekend, but we met up every day this past weekend, including today, to read a very interesting, horrible, but good book. I don't know it's going to be an interesting discussion for sure.
Yeah, so we're going to hop into that discussion soon. Like, we literally just finished the book 15 minutes ago, and I'm feeling all sorts of feelings. But yeah, how's other than this book? We'll get back to that. How are you doing, Raylene?
Good. So another thing I did this weekend was set up my Christmas tree. So,
yes,
because I'm very much in the vein of people that's like, Christmas doesn't start until December, because I'm not like hardcore about Christmas. I've just been getting into it a little bit more and more each year. Like, totally. I'm excited to watch some Christmas movies. I don't know which ones yet, but I'm getting excited. But I haven't like dipped my toes into Christmas at all yet, other than putting up our tree. So we also went and bought some lights to put up outside, because this is our first Christmas, like, after we've been fully settled into this house. And we forgot to get like clips or something to actually hang them up. So we were like, I've never done this before. I don't know how to put up Christmas lights. So we bought lights, and then as we were on our way home, I was like, how are we going to put them up? And Cal was like, you know what? You're right. I don't know. So I'm going to deal with that probably after we're done recording today. So I do really want to put them up. But yeah.
What color of lights did you go
They're
with?
actually so cool. They're purple, blue, and green. They're just like cool tone, like my favorite colors.
That's very you and Kyle.
Yeah,
like, that goes with the vibe.
Exactly. I couldn't believe it that was like a box of lights that already existed. Like, it was just the three colors I like most, and I was like, that sounds nice. Let's do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm excited to kind of get into it. One of my neighbors has so many lights on the front of their house. Like, it's scary when I come home at night.
Competition has begun.
Yeah, like, I just want nice, normal, calm lights. But it's kind of funny. Every time I come home, that's the first thing I see is just this crazy house. Like, they even have like words written out in lights. Like, it says ho 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 on the side of their house. I'm like, oh my god, it's really intense.
That's awesome.
But it's fun. I'm excited to
go big or go home.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, I also, as you know, have had a busy week because Raylene and I, like she said, have called every day for the last 3 days. And so every day Ray's like, what's going on? And I'll say, what's going on? And it's just been very hectic, but good. It's been good. I just feel like Christmas time gets so busy. It gets really busy with like all of these different things that people are hosting and events you want to attend. And I went to a thrift market in Halifax, which was really fun. It was actually it was so funny because I have gone to this thrift market. I think I'm sure I've even shouted it out here on the podcast before. It's called Curio. That's the name of like whoever runs the Curio thrift market or vintage market. And they host it every season. And so there's a spring one, summer one, a fall one, and a Christmas one. And I just love it. There's so many great booths, I think it's either them as well or the same venue does a craft show as well. I really enjoyed the craft show. I love going to see what everyone has made. And like, I bought my main purse at the craft one because there was an incredible leather maker who just made this beautiful purse. So I was like, really like that. But I like the vintage one more just because like there's a lot of clothing and I love thrifting for vintage clothing, and there's furniture and there's like lighting fixtures. So it's just like stuff for my house and stuff that I really enjoy. But yeah, they always host it on a weekend. It's a Saturday and a Sunday. And I usually go on the Saturday, or maybe I think I've gone once on a Sunday morning. And I literally think I've gone to like 5 or 6 of these now. I love them. This time, and maybe they've done this before and I just didn't realize, but this time they were doing a first dibs night the night before.
Oh my.
So on Friday night from 5 to 8, you could go, and all of the booths were there. All of the people were there hosting their booths, but you had to buy a ticket. So obviously they were trying to like just have a new idea for how to make money. So you had to buy a ticket, but that ticket came with a drink.
Oh.
And so it was kind of an expensive ticket. I'm not going to lie. I was on the fence about it. It was $25. And I was like, that's very expensive for
just
any form of ticket.
Get in and get
just to get in to then spend more money. Right.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm paying to pay.
Yeah. Wow.
So I was like, okay, I've done this thrift market though so many times, or this vintage market so many times, that it would be fun to like try something new. Mm-hmm. So I go with a friend of mine and we decide to do it. So I buy us the tickets and then we show up and we have a drink. And I will just say we'd had a drink beforehand as well. So now we're drinking a half in, walking into the thrift market, and we both looked at each other and we're like, these people are geniuses. I've never wanted to spend money so much than being a little tipsy walking through a vintage fair at 7 p.m. on a Friday night.
Oh, yeah. You're like, are you kidding me?
You're freaking genius. And we like almost right away bought something, and we were like, okay, we need to have a team meeting. Mm-hmm. We cannot spend all of our money here. We have to check each other because we're both like a little lost. But it ended up being a really fun thing. I would not do this every single time. Yeah. But it was it felt Christmassy too, because it was the Christmas version of the market. Right. And so there's a lot of vintage Christmas decor out and stuff like that. So it was a silly fun time. It was a silly fun time. That does
sound fun.
It was good. I got a new ring. I was very excited about that. I got this new shirt that I'm very excited about. And I got a new cardigan. That was a steal, you guys. It was $15. I couldn't believe it. It was very exciting. But yeah, so I had a fun weekend. Other things went down as well. Like just a friend of mine hosted a white elephant.
Oh,
Have
yeah.
you ever done a white elephant, Raylene?
Yeah, that happens in that Christmas movie you love.
Oh, God.
What is that movie called?
So I've already watched it. Happiest Season.
Happiest Season.
I watched it already. It was great, as always. But you know, Kristen Stewart shouldn't end up with her girlfriend at the end of that movie. She really should end up with Aubrey Plaza. And if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, go watch Happiest Season. But yeah, so the white elephant Christmas style party is basically everyone brings one gift.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a generally like respected gift. Like it could fit
anyone
for anyone.
Could take it, yeah. Yeah,
they're all put in the middle. Then the first person opens a present, and then is like, yay, thank you so much to whoever gave it to me. But it's always anonymous. Like you're not supposed to say anything. Then the second person can either steal that present or open a new present. Right. Say she opens a second present, then the third person can steal from the first or second person. So really you want to go last because you could steal from anyone or just take the last present.
Yeah, those parties kind of freak me out. Or those like that type of gift exchange. Really. I kind of hate them a little bit.
It was very stressful. The ladies that I went to this party with were all so friendly. There was so much food and merriment, and it was like overall a very, very lovely time. But the concept I found very stressful, and I'd never done it before, so I didn't know if I would or not. But I was like, first of all, feeling so much fear that people would hate the thing that I bought because you're not tailoring it to anyone, right? Yeah. And I'm like, what if someone hates getting a book and nobody else bought a book?
Yeah, like seeing your item getting traded every single time or something.
I know, it would be so horrible. And so that didn't happen, thankfully. But my present was the last one to be opened, and that made me feel so stressed because I was like, they hate it. They already hate. They don't even know what's in there. And they hate it. They don't even know it's mine, but they hate it. I messed this up. I felt so stressed about that, no. And then when it finally did get open, the person really liked it, so I felt really relieved. But it was so stressful, but then I also felt like secondhand stress because I was like, what if someone says something mean about somebody else's present or like and I'm like, you don't know whose feelings you're hurting. I was like, I am not built for that.
Yeah. I don't like
not built for this.
I don't like it at all.
No, it was a little stressful. I don't think that I would do that again, because I just felt, I was like, I'd rather just like a Secret Santa where you're just told who you're buying the present
exactly,
for.
and you tailor it to that
give
person.
It to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Secret Santa's way better. So what was the gift that you gave, and what did you receive?
Yes. So the budget was $40, which was a little expensive, right? I was a little like, oh God, I've got to do a good job. So what I gave was Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed.
Yes. Very good.
A universally good book, I think. I really think that is a book with universal mass appeal.
I agree.
And especially everyone at this party was a woman between the ages of like 27 and 35.
Perfect.
So I was like, this book was made for these women.
Yeah.
Like, they need this book.
Yeah.
So I got that. I got a really lovely and incredible smelling soap, like a fancy soap.
Good stuff.
And then I got actually the same mini puzzle. It was a different picture, but from the same person, the same mini puzzle that I got you, because I was like, it's a little fancy. It's a little bit of a luxurious puzzle, but it's little, so it's not that much of a commit. And I feel like it would be very nice over Christmas. You'll have some free time on your break. You could do a little puzzle.
That's perfect.
So that was my thinking. So that was what I gave.
Yeah, that's a great gift.
What I received was a lovely set of glasses, like wine glasses,
nice.
like 4 pink glasses, and a box from Lush with like 2 Lush bath bombs.
Can't go wrong with that.
No, totally a winning package. And I don't have a bath.
Oh yeah.
As anyone who has seen my videos has watched, but I'm like now extra motivated to finish my bathroom.
That bath.
Because then I'll get to have a bath with these bath bombs.
Amazing.
Seems like a winning deal to me. A motivator for Christmas.
The greatest gift of all.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. The most common gift, I thought the most common gift was going to be candles. Only one person gifted a candle.
Oh,
and
wow.
I think probably people were like, I shouldn't gift a candle. Like everyone's expecting a candle.
That makes sense.
But it was funny because one person was like, this is so surprising. No one's gifted a candle yet. And then she opened the present and it was the candle. But the most common gift was a charcuterie board. 2 people gifted giant wooden charcuterie boards. I was like, that's very interesting. I'm like, one was really adorable. It was a gingerbread man.
Oh.
Yeah, with like little metal buttons running
nice.
down his little
That's
tum.
nice.
So it was very cute. But yeah,
Fun stuff.
I know that there's a lot of these things going around at Christmas. Different iterations on gift giving, because it could be your office or it could be just a group of friends or whatever. So it was interesting to experience that for the first time.
That is super fun. Yeah, I don't really have anything like that coming up other than my Yule celebration with my 2 best pals that we always do our little parties now. That's our new thing. So we haven't really like made a plan yet, but last year we decided to do handmade gifts for each other. And cute. This year we didn't like agree on that necessarily, but we're still doing like a mix of like handmade and stuff. So I just had an idea yesterday for something I could make. So
a breakthrough.
It's what I'm going to do later today, I think. It's a fun little crochet emergency.
Oh, God, I've been there.
But I've got time.
Well,
I've got lots of time,
crochet,
but I want to get it all done now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
Well, with that being said, let's attune. Let's attune to what we're supposed to be talking about, which is books. Actually, I'm going to interrupt us all again and just say our book survey, if you want to participate, is linked here. It is linked in the show notes. It's linked in the description, and you only have a week left to do it. And we really encourage you to do it because it's really fun. It's just a survey where you can tell us how many books did you read this year? What was the genre you read the most this year, et cetera, et cetera. And then we can kind of get a look at what the Books Unbound community, what our reading year was like. So if you want to check that out, little plug for that survey, it's down below. But okay, now let's talk about our reading. We each only read 1 book.
Yes.
And it was the most depraved book we've ever read. It was.
Pretty much.
A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess.
So this is fun because as the people will remember, I just bought this last week. Like I just got this book.
Yep.
And then you suggested that we read it together. And then we just
Yes.
did.
I know. How awesome is that?
It was awesome. Most successful buddy read ever, I would say, in terms of our dedication and actually doing it and like discussing as we were going.
Think you're totally right about
I feel
that.
the most successful about how we did that.
So last week on the podcast, Raylene, like you said, you hauled this book and I was like, hey, I'm trying to read more classics before the end of the year to try and finish that goal of mine. We should read that book together. Then we finished recording the episode, and then after the episode, Raylene was like, so let's set up, like, let's do something soon. Should we play a game? Should we read a book? And I was like, well, what if we actually did do A Clockwork Orange? Like, I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
And Raylene's like, actually, yeah, that would be fun. Let's try it out. Yeah. And so we were thinking of different ways to do buddy reads. And quite frankly, I'm just going to be open-hearted with you guys, vulnerable for a second. I haven't done great at buddy reads this year with Raylene.
It's been a little bit
touch and go. There's been a couple of letdowns from old Ariel. But here's the sitch. Sometimes you just got to accept who you are. And we have had a couple successful buddy reads with graphic novels.
Yes.
And they're when we read together.
Yeah.
And so Raylene intelligently suggested, what if we tried, even though this is like an actual... whatever, not that a graphic novel isn't an actual novel, but like it's just text. This is just text. What if we like still called and read it together and just gave it a try? Let's just see what happens. And so that's what we did. We met on Saturday and we were like, well, let's just try reading for 20 minutes and we'll see how we feel, because there was two possibilities. Possibility number one was that we would hate reading together quietly on the phone. And the second possibility was that we would hate this book and we wouldn't actually want to read it. And we didn't have to commit to it. We were like, we could pivot to a different book or just play Stardew Valley or something. But we were intrigued. We were having fun. So we ended up reading the first part, because this book, conveniently for us, is broken into 3 parts. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, each with 7 chapters. Yeah. Each pretty equitable in length. And so on Sunday we read Part 2, on Monday we read Part 3.
It was crazy how perfectly that worked out.
Here we are. It worked out perfectly. We should just read books that are 140 pages long and written in 3 easy sections.
Yeah, does anybody else have something like that they can recommend? Because we love that.
That's so funny. What to say? Okay, we've got a lot of thoughts.
There's a lot.
Let's start by, Raylene, how about you give like a general summary, non-spoilery summary of the plot?
Okay, so the main character is this 15-year-old boy named Alex, and him and his pals love just like running around town wreaking havoc, like causing violence and mayhem. And that's essentially like how the book starts out. It's just like just pure chaos. Alex and his friends just being horrible, being terrible. And then it's about his journey and like what, things change within him, or like how he's, asked to change potentially to fit society better and all these things. But it's just like really, really, really depraved, like lots of descriptions of violence and horrible things. But what's really interesting about the book is the language used. So Anthony Burgess kind of created his own language that's called Nadsat, which in the book is basically like, it means teenage language. It's like slang that teens use.
Teenage slang.
And it made for a very interesting reading experience for a lot of reasons, because not only is it at first very difficult to understand, and we were like constantly checking a Wikipedia page to be like, what does that word mean? But it kind of makes you feel a little bit removed from what's happening a little bit, because there's all these horrible events happening, but you're like, is that what's happening? Like, did he just do, oh yeah, okay, he did. But it was said in such a way that like, you don't realize he's like beating someone up, and you're like, oh, that means the person is bleeding. Like, oh, wow. It's just like very interesting the way it kind of removes you from it a little bit. So it is very violent and very like horrific, but it doesn't read that way necessarily. Like it reads in a very, it's hard to explain, but it's like a very interesting reading experience.
I feel like I should give a little example of a sentence here. This is just a sentence in the first paragraph of the book. Like it's just like the sentence 4 or something. They had no license for selling liquor, but there was no law yet against prodding some of the new veshes, which they used to put into the old Moloko, so you could peat it with Velicet or Synthmesk or Drencrom or 1 or 2 other veshes. which would give you a nice quiet horror show, 15 minutes admiring Bog and all his horror angels and saints in the left shoe with lights bursting all over your mozg. Now, you might be thinking,
what the hell?
What was that? That's what Raylene and me were thinking.
In the first 20 minutes, we were a little bit like, I don't know. I don't know about this.
Ooh, but it was, I'm glad you brought the language up, because I think that was, for me and for us, like one of the most interesting parts of this book.
Yeah, it's a very important aspect.
It really is a really important aspect. And I don't think I've ever read anything quite like this before. Because obviously I've read some books or books that have a character that speak with a dialect, and or I'm even thinking of like Hagrid. Yeah. Like J.K. Rowling really tried to put his accent into how he's written and stuff. But like characters like that and stuff. But this is like a whole made up language that you're really trying to figure out as you go along. And so Raylene and I would be like, Vaughn means smell, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, that's what I think it means too. Okay. And then we keep going and we're like, okay, definitely Veshes means this. And like, Moloko is milk, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then eventually, like half an hour into reading, we looked up online a vocabulary because we were like, this is helpful. And so we would sometimes cross-reference words, but we really didn't for every single word.
A lot of times, like we would just ask each other aloud, like, "Do you remember what this means?" And we would just kind of know because we were that means a collective.
Watched, or that means, but it was really, like you said, Raylene. It was, first of all, it made the insane, and I mean insane, amount of violence not feel as violent because you barely knew what was going on. And it's like words for punch and kick and drag and all of those sorts of like fighting words all had their own words. And then words for like blood and all of those words also had their own words. So you're reading this and you're like, okay, a kerfuffle just happened, but I don't know exactly what happened.
Yeah, because there's so many different moving parts and it's like you're reading a different language, quite literally. And so you're like, do I understand what just happened? Yeah, it's very interesting. Something else that I find interesting about the language and the way it was used was that it made the book kind of funny, which like,
I'm glad you brought that up.
Was interesting because it's like it feels wrong that it would be funny while it's also being so violent and disgusting. But it was quite funny. And like there's something that kept coming up, which was that the main character would always, if he noticed someone's outfit, he would always say he was dressed in the height of fashion. And we thought that was so funny. Like it just kept coming up. And then there's one moment where somebody is dressed not in the height of fashion. And it was really like, whew. Really hit hard.
On the edition that we both read, it has a quotation from William Burroughs. The quotation is, I do not know of any writer. Ariel can't read today. I keep reading it wrong. I'm just so messed up to just be reading plain English. I do not know of any other writer who has done as much with language. A very funny book. That was William S. Burroughs who said that.
Oh, yeah.
So because we were like, is this supposed to be funny? Because it's kind of hilarious.
It is
like,
low-key hilarious.
A lot of funny moments. Like right near the end there, he was in a diner eating, and he's like, everyone in there was eating eggs and wolfing it down. Wolf, 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 wolfing it down. And like he like repeats words like that, and he like
or like one part where somebody comes up to him and goes, well, if it's not Alex. It's like repeats it just a few too many times.
Or like he called his dad. There was a couple of different words for mom and dad, but a couple of the times he'd say pa pa pa, and you're like he liked the repeating thing of which was funny, but also just some of the words are funny. Like his head is his Gulliver.
And Tolchok means punch, but like Tolchok is a crazy word.
I Tolchoked his Gulliver, and you're like. It's kind of funny, which it adds to the insane brutality of it as well, because you're becoming removed and you're getting into his head. And part of the whole thing about the language as well was like you mentioned, it's called Nadsat, which turns out to be like Russian for teen. So it's this teen slang language, but it's used by this like subculture of teens who are all in these little gangs, and they're all part of this like violent uprising that all these teens are doing. Every night they go out and they're violent. And so you start to feel a little bit like you're in the gang because you are reading and you're starting to truly understand the language. Like, I was totally understanding the language.
Yeah.
I was like, well, he viddied this and he slooshied that, and I'm like, he watched and heard that. I now knew those words. It just makes and stuff. So it starts to make sense. So you start to fall into it, which is a really effective use of language by an author to get you into this character's mind a little bit. Let's just talk about the violence for a second, because a huge theme in the book was, this is not going to spoil it. Basically, like, we have this character who's really violent, does a lot of crime. A lot of crime. Just like what I think a normal criminal's amount of crime in one night. Yeah. He's just like, every night to him is like, woohoo, debauchery. This amount of violence, though, like, the rest of the book is kind of his experience through the penal system and stuff. And so you're asking this big question, or the author is getting you to ask this big question, like, can you ever be forgiven for violence, or can you ever be forgiven for subjecting someone to that much violence? And I think those questions were really interesting, because I don't know if we ever did. Raylene and I, like, at the end, were like, we still don't feel bad for this guy, really. I did at one point, because like, I don't want to spoil anything, right? But there's like this whole psychological horror show going. I said horror show. Oh my God. That was one of their words, you guys.
And that doesn't mean horror show.
No, it means great. And I didn't mean great. I meant a horror show of like brainwashing is like an element, because this is sort of a dystopian book. And I kind of felt bad because they took away one of the only things that brought him joy, and I do feel bad. I felt that successfully to me was like a horror. I was like, wow, that's a really scary concept. What does this man have to live for? But the violence that he does is so violent that I almost feel like maybe our buddy Anthony Burgess here, the author, might have gone a little too far, because I was like, is this man even, can we feel bad for him at the end?
I don't think so, because he's just so terrible. It's so unforgivable.
It's like really, really messed up. I think it was the first day that we read. I was like, Ray, I think this is the worst thing I've ever read, like, violence-wise. Like, I think this is the most horrifying thing I've ever read. And then the next day, I was driving a lot. I just had to drive around a lot that day with errands and stuff. And I was really thinking about the book. I was like, I think it is the most depraved thing I've ever read, because Lolita, I was like, I think Lolita was the most depraved thing, and it is horror. Obviously, I'm not saying this doesn't have to be a competition. They're on the tier or whatever, but this one also just has the like violence of like beating people up and stuff, and like it's just merciless. It doesn't matter who they encounter; they're gonna destroy them, and you're like, these gangs are so effed up. Yeah, and then I remember I said to you, Raylene, I was like, you read like horror and crime, which I don't really read horror, crime, or thrillers, but do you still feel like this is the most depraved thing you've read?
I would say so, just because like there was no level of understanding for why it was happening, I guess. Like usually with a crime novel or a true crime book, it's like, obviously it's horrible that people are causing violence or like murder to people, but they like had their own sense of reasoning for it, so you can like in a way understand where they're coming from. With this, it was just pure joy for him. Like, he just loved to hurt people. And it was like, what? So that was something else we talked about, is we didn't really understand the world that well, because it is kind of a dystopian future is the vibe we're getting. But we didn't really understand why. And there was one part at the beginning of the book where he's like, him and his friends are like, oh, well, we're a bunch of young boys. We have to go to school tomorrow. And we were like excited for him to go to school so we could interact with other like quote unquote normal teenagers, like if there are any normal teenagers. But then he didn't go to school. And so we never got to see like, we were really upset about that. You even said at one point, I really wish you went to school that day.
Go to school, not just to become a better person, because oh my God, but also because we wanted to learn more about the world. That was definitely, I think, for both of us, definitely for me, the worst part of this book. Not moral-wise. Moral-wise, it was all of the horrible crime, obviously. But I mean, like, writing-wise or construction-wise, the book didn't go into enough of the world building. And so, just as Raylene has said, a lot of the reasoning for things didn't hit as close to home. And of course, I'm going to compare it to other similar-ish books, like a short dystopian classic, Animal Farm. Let's take, for example, another book about totalitarianism. In that book, it's so well explained and clear from literally the first paragraph why the animals are so oppressed.
Yeah.
Like why they feel so oppressed, why they're so downtrodden, and why they want to have a revolution. It's all so clearly expressed. And then they have their revolution, and then you follow through with them and you understand and see why the world is so horrible and why it's all slipping away from them, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel the same way in 1984, for example. Like, it's a world that's so horrible, and you see why Winston feels so awful that he wants to do something about it.
Yeah.
In this book, it starts with this little gang of teens at a restaurant or at a bar. And they're like, all right, boys, what are we going to do tonight? And then they head out on the scene and they cause all this violence. And then he doesn't go to school, and then he goes to jail for a while, and you're like, damn, we never zoomed out. We never zoomed out enough to be like, what is this world about? Why did this world come about? And therefore, why is Alex so bad? Are all teenagers like this? Are, like, what's going on in this society? We couldn't tell.
And I feel like I need that, like, level of understanding of a world like this, like in a dystopian novel. I need to understand why it's happening, I think, to be able to appreciate the greater message, because in the end we were like, what was the author trying to say? Like, it made it a little bit harder to understand what the point was, because it being a dystopian world is a big part of it, but we don't really understand the world. So it was like,
Yeah, and like I would again, comparing it to another book that we buddy read, actually, Eileen. We buddy read that one, right?
We read it for a book club, so kind of, yeah.
Okay, right. So with Eileen, that's another very unlikable character. Not as unlikable as Alex, because Alex is
old Uncle Alex.
A real piece of work, Uncle Alex. Good Lord. But like in Eileen, she's like very unlikable, kind of gross, kind of living in but you have some sympathy for her because she lives in such a horrible house with such a horrible dad and in such poverty and in such, like, she can't escape it kind of oppressive feeling that you're like, God, you suck and I don't like you, but I do have a little bit of sympathy or empathy for you. Like, I do get why you've become the way you've become.
Yeah.
It was really difficult for us to sympathize at all for Alex, because we're like, how'd you become this way? Your parents seem kind of chill. The world doesn't seem that bad, but maybe it is, but we just don't know.
We just don't know, yeah.
We just don't know. One of the interesting things we learned as well was kind of like a little bit behind the scenes of the book. Like, I did some deep diving, not that deep. I did some shallow diving is what I meant to say, into the book yesterday, because I didn't want to spoil myself on the book, but I wanted to get just a little bit more insight into the author's writing of the book. And it's really interesting. First of all, he was largely inspired to write this book because he went away from the UK for a while and then returned for years. And he returned to a place that was, like, for him, quite different than it had been.
Okay.
And it was like the 60s in England, and there was this big punk movement. And obviously a lot of punk movement, when we now think of it, is like really charming and cool, and so much great music came out of that.
Yeah.
But also what came out of that was a lot of violence and a lot of gangs and a lot of, like, crime. And so he saw this and he was like, okay, wow, this whole young subculture is, like, really a thing that's happening right now. How are we supposed to reckon with it? And on top of that, during this time, his wife was beat up by a group of youngins. They happened to be American. They were, like, American soldiers that were over because of the war and stuff. But, like, they beat her up and she miscarried because of it. So it's like, you're like, actually, that really explains where this book comes from, right? Like, I think maybe he was really asking that question of, like, who, like, why did that crime happen to my wife?
Yeah.
She clearly wasn't
completely
doing
meaningless.
Yeah, it seems to be completely meaningless. And this book seems like the violence is meaningless. So maybe that is the question he was grappling with.
Yeah.
The other really interesting thing I learned was that he wrote it in 3 weeks.
That is crazy.
That is wild in so many different ways, but partly because, like I said to Raylene yesterday, I was like, how did he invent a language so fast? That's so epic. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the other interesting things is that, like, later on in his life, he was a little resentful of the book because he felt like people were taking it out of context. I think he didn't like the movie, and he said that the movie was, like, just like glorified sex and violence, which was not the point of his book. And he was like, I think I shouldn't have written it as quickly as I did because clearly I left some things up to interpretation that I wish I hadn't. And I was like, that's interesting. So yeah, it's always for me fun to learn a little bit more about how the book was written.
Totally. Okay, well, to finish off the discussion of this book, I have the most important question for you. Did you like it?
Oh, you know what?
I know it's complicated, but yeah.
I did like it. I did. Would I recommend it? No, I would not recommend. I don't recommend you that you read this book.
That's exactly how I feel. Like I liked the reading experience. Like I liked reading it with you. I feel like it was a very interesting piece of literature that I'll never ever read anything quite like it.
Yeah.
But I definitely wouldn't, like, I don't know who I would suggest this to. I can't think of a single person that I would be like, I really think you should read this book.
I know. I think we're totally on the same page, which is funny because we didn't actually ask each other that question when we finished it before recording.
It was kind of a secret.
It was kind of a secret. But yeah, no, I feel the same. I'm really glad that I read it.
Yeah, me too.
Because first of all, just for the basic fact of it's been sitting on my shelf for years and I've been meaning to get to it. Secondly, because now I know when people talk about A Clockwork Orange, and that's one of my favorite parts of reading classics, is that so much of our culture is based on these classics, and they can be classic movies as well, classic books or classic songs. When you finally enjoy, or not enjoy, but like experience that piece of classic art, all of these references now become unlocked to you, and you can now participate in all of that. And if someone ever says it's a real horror show, then I'm like, oh, I know what you mean by that. True. And want some Moloko, I'll be like, I know what that is. Like I love that about classics in general. So for those reasons, I'm just objectively glad that I read another classic and that it's unlocked these things for me. But yeah, I've never read a book that did this particular thing with language. And I've read lots of other books that have done lots of other interesting things with language. Totally. But this was a really unique one. And I'm like, I really did fall into it. And I really enjoyed my reading journey with this book. I'm so glad that we read it so quickly.
Me too.
Because it's over now. And it was like, I was explaining to Raylene, I was like, and this is something that me and my brother talk about, like, sometimes you shouldn't read or watch dark things because they will put a dark vibe over your day. And an example for me is like, I need to be conscious of like when I watch a movie about World War II, because if I watch it at the wrong part of the day, it will make me so depressed that the whole day I will be sad.
Oh, no.
This did that. Like, it made the last 3 days a little dark for me. I was like thinking about it the whole time, and I was like, God, it's so dark. It's so effed up. And like, I don't know if we've exactly touched on this, but like any type of horrible, violent crime that you can imagine happen, the worst crimes that you can imagine happen in the book. So it like trigger warnings to the nth degree or whatever. It's just pushes it right to the end. So it's like quite a horrific book. So therefore I can't recommend it to I don't know. And it's like, no, while I would say it's awful.
Yeah, like while I would say I enjoyed the book, I didn't always enjoy being in it, if that makes sense. You know? Because like it is
almost
grim.
Wish like it would be sort of an art piece in a weird way if we had recorded ourselves reading it, because guys, like
the amount of gas.
It was so predictable, sort of like Raylene and I got to a point, and it took a little bit of finessing, but we got to a point where we were basically reading at the same pace.
Yes.
And like we would always be within the same paragraph or two of each other. And I would say, what line are you on? And she'd read the line, and she'd be 3 behind or 3 ahead. And I'm like, okay. And then we could discuss exactly what we were on. But like it got to a point where we would be laughing. We'd be like, haha, in the height of fashion. And like, haha, this funny line. And then we'd go dead silent because like an actual horrible crime was happening. And we'd get to the end of the chapter and we'd be like,
oh man,
wow.
Oh.
Okay.
on to the next chapter. Yeah.
Like, we just go so dead silent because the book had these ups and downs. So it was not, like, always enjoyable to read, but that's the point of reading, right? Like, it's like the ups and downs that the author's taking you on. So I did think that it did something that I've never read before, and I really disagree with this idea that, like, what an author writes is what an author believes.
Yeah, I really agree.
That's not real. Yeah. That's just not real. So I don't think in any way that Anthony Burgess is for crime or for ultra-violent crime or for anything. He's exploring an idea through words in the safest way, right? Like, he's not doing these crimes or anything. He's just writing about them. And so reading it, I was like, this is really interesting. I've never read anything like this before. I sort of hope that I don't again.
Yeah.
I'm not suddenly like, woohoo, turned on to crime books. Let's go. I'm like, no, wow. Harrowing. Harrowing for sure.
Well, are you reading anything else? We didn't really talk about that throughout the weekend, but do you have anything else on your plate?
I was gonna, but this took up our whole it took up our whole week in a beautiful way. Or like my whole weekend, which was kind of the time I had free for reading. Yeah. We spent 3 hours reading the first day, 2 hours reading the second day, and then I think we finished it in an hour and a half today. Yeah. So all of my reading time went to A Clockwork Orange.
That's fair.
And yeah, but this is another classic checked off.
Hell yeah, list.
It is. So whatever I read next, guys, I'm going for the frickin' gold on this one.
Yeah,
okay,
because you've read what is that 9 now? Have you done 9 or 10?
Yes, this was my 9th one.
Okay, just 3 more.
3 more.
3 more. You've done it.
3 more.
Do you have any ideas for what you're going to read next? Like, do you have a feeling?
Okay. I tried starting The Call of the Wild last night. It's so good. It's great. But I don't know if I have the strength to read a dog story.
Oh,
they're so emotional. They're more emotional than people's
They really are.
Sometimes, right? Like, it's like scary in a way that you're like, nothing can happen to this dog. And I'm like, a lot is going to happening to the dog.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can take that right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
I was saving... Did I move it? Oh, I don't have it here. But I was saving A Christmas Carol for later on, but I might just hop into that one.
Yeah. I mean,
the other one. Time. This one's definitely... I'm decided this is definitely happening. So this might... Actually, yeah, I think I'll do this one next.
Just do it.
A Single Man, Christopher Isherwood. Do you remember? This was one of my unfinished books of the year.
I thought you finished it. What the heck? Oh my...
No, I did not finish it.
Plot twist. Wow.
It got dropped to the wayside, never to be seen again.
Well, then that's really easy for you to finish then. It's only like half the book.
I'm already I think I'm like halfway through. I don't have a bookmark in here, but I think I was like halfway through.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is I realized this like on Saturday or something. I was like, hold on. Do
you have any other half-finished classics?
I know, right? Hopefully I remember another one. I started The Trial by Kafka, and I was enjoying it, but I only got a few chapters in, so I wasn't halfway.
You're so funny.
Anyhow, what about you?
Well, I am still reading In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, but I am now on part 4. There's, I think, just 4 parts in the book. So I'm now in like the home stretch kind of. And I would say I'm still liking it. I'm not loving it as much as I was at the beginning, but that's mostly because like the beginning of the book, part 1 is about kind of the lead up to the murders happening. And so you kind of get to know the family. The first chapter is quite literally called The Last Time They Were Seen Alive or something like that. And so you're just like getting all these experiences from different people's perspectives of like, this was the last time I saw them. And then part 2 is kind of all about the murders. Part 3 is kind of about the confessions of the people who committed the crimes. And then part 4 I'm thinking is going to be about them like going to court and being tried for the crimes, which I'm very excited for because that's the thing that interests me the most a lot of times in like crime stories. I love the justice aspect of it. I love seeing how the justice system works. That really fascinates me. So I'm hoping that's what part 4 is going to be, because then it'll end on a high note. But I found the middle to be a little bit of a slog. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But I am hoping to finish this today, if possible, and read something happy.
Good Lord.
I think I want to read something happy after this. I don't know what that'll be. I don't really have a plan yet, but I'm like, I just need something wholesome, for the love of God.
I know. Another one I was considering was The House on Mango Street. Ooh. That's a classic that I have, and I'm like,
And it's really
the
short.
The cover seems cheerful, but I'm scared that it will be a sad experience as well.
It could be. You just never know. You never know.
Well, did you buy anything?
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, me neither. I don't have anything to haul. We're gonna.
It's been a grim week. No new books.
Dark and spooky
just
week.
sad reads, like depressing reads. But you know what's not sad? The book game that I have planned for us.
Book game!
So it's been a while since we've done a book game, and so I really wanted to make it good, I think. And I had this idea a little while ago and never really like finished it, but recently I decided to really flesh out this book tag that I've created. And it's just very simple. It's called the Stardew Valley book tag. Created by Books Unbound, I guess. It's the Books Unbound Stardew Valley book tag. And so, and this has potential for a sequel as well, because what I've done is I've created a tag that is a bunch of different prompts that are associated with different characters. The characters are all of the marriageable characters, as well as Farmer and Grandpa. So like all of the core characters, I would say. And I could do a part 2 of this with every other character. So
I know it's so tough because I was like, how is Robin not on here? How is Pierre not on here?
I know. I just tried to keep it. I tried to keep it to a theme to give myself a structure to work with. And so that's what I've done. So, and the questions are kind of all over the place, kind of random, but I think that makes it fun.
I will say, if you haven't played Stardew Valley, you don't know anything about this game, you don't know anything about the characters, it really doesn't matter because the prompts are pretty general.
Yeah.
It just takes one trait from one of the characters and then asks a question using that trait. So I think you'll still have fun listening to this, and also you could still participate in it. And if you do want to participate in it, post it on wherever you want to post it or just think through it yourself. We can we'll link to all of the questions. We'll put the questions in the description and show notes.
Absolutely. All right. So without further ado, let's begin. So the first question is Farmer, a book that doesn't say much, but it's good anyway.
Very good. I like what you did there.
Thank you.
I went with a slightly funny approach for this one. Okay. I chose Rental Person Who Does Nothing by Shoji Morimoto.
Interesting. Okay.
And this is because in most of his interactions, when the rental person goes and does one of his experiences, he doesn't speak and doesn't really respond. He just stays quiet. So I was like,
I like that you did that because
perfect.
That is perfectly in the spirit of Farmer, because Farmer is like who you play as a character in Stardew Valley, but you don't really talk. Like, and that's part of like a meme of Stardew is that you're just running around, not talking, throwing gifts at people.
You never talk. You never say anything. You never have a line of dialogue, but you are doing stuff. And that is Rental Person Who Does Nothing.
That's
perfect. You guys remember, it was a memoir I read earlier this year about a guy who gets rented out on Twitter to do small, easy tasks, but the only thing is that he doesn't do anything. So it'll be like, I want to get an iced tea with someone. And so he'll go with you, there. But he's not going to talk.
That's perfect. Well, I went with the different approach, which I'm sure is what most people would do in this case, which is just a fluffy book. And so I decided to go with the Georgia Nicholson series by Louise Renison because those are just pure fluff and fun. Very funny, very silly. But yeah, I don't think there's like a deep message in there other than, you know, maybe something about friendship, but it's just a light, fluffy, fun time. So that's what I went with for that. Okay, number 2, Grandpa, a book you read a long time ago but still think about.
Love it.
That's nice.
I chose God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. That was a book I read so many years. I was living in BC, so it would have at least been 3 years ago, if not longer, because I remember reading it in that room when I lived there, and I think about that book all the time. I think it's so interesting. It asks some really interesting questions about the concept of like billionaires and wealth and being rich and helping your community, but in the worst way ever. I think it's really, really great. More people should read that one. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's read it.
That's crazy.
So good.
That's crazy. Yeah. Okay, well, I went with The Chrysalids by John Wyndham, which I read in grade 10 in high school. So it was a really long time ago. That was 2010, folks. That was a long time ago. And I haven't reread it. That's the thing that's craziest to me about this book is that it pops up into my head randomly a lot. And I'll be like, The Chrysalids. What a great book. But I haven't reread it. And it's been so long. So I really think I need to push myself to just do a reread maybe next year because it's so good. It's so good. All right. here we are on to the first Bachelor. And these are like in no order. They're just random in the order I thought of the people. So first up is Sebastian. A book that would wear a leather jacket and smoke cigarettes if it was a person. I really like that one.
I chose Bonjour Tristesse
Ooh.
by Francois Sagan. Partly because it's a French classic and that feels like smoking cigarettes.
Yes, that's
partly
perfect.
because the main character is this like suave girl who doesn't care about anything and it just wants to be like beautiful and have fun. So it feels like an ultimate hipster book. So
Ooh.
I really enjoyed that book.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, well, I went with a very obvious choice because I couldn't think of anything else, and this got stuck in my head.
Is it The Outsiders?
It's The Outsiders.
Yeah.
I just, because it's funny, there's actually like versions of that cover that just have like a leather jacket on the front of it.
Yeah, I think that's what I own.
I just couldn't think of anything that made more sense to me than that book for this. But I would love to hear what other people come up with because I think it's a very silly prompt that could mean a lot of different things. Okay, next up, Harvey. A book about a niche interest. For those who don't know, he is obsessed with airplanes.
I chose Vanishing Fleece by Vanishing Fleece Vanishing Fleece: Adventures in American Wool by Clara Parks. So this is a book that is a nonfiction account of Clara Parks learning about the wool industry in America. And like, she basically has a friend, she's like really into knitting and yarn, but she has this friend who has this giant, like, she's got sheep and they shave the sheep and then you've got the raw wool material. And she's like, cool, I'll just turn it into yarn. And then she's like, oh, wow, this is like a whole journey to turn it into yarn. And she goes on that adventure and investigates big wool in America and everything. Very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Very interesting. Well, I took a slightly different approach to this. I chose a book that's just about a niche interest of mine. And so that book is Letters to a Young Gymnast by Nadia Comaneci, because that's a book that you got me, and I'm so glad that you did, because it was one of my favorite books of last year, the year before, whenever I read it. And I don't know why, but I'm just very, very interested in gymnastics. I don't know why. Can't explain it. Never was a gymnast. Well, I was a little bit of a gymnast when I was a very small child, but there's no other explanation for it. So it's just strange, but that's a great book. Okay, next up is My Guy Shane. A book that's a bit of a mess. What you got?
On our combo farm, I was like trying to be relatable to the people. It's all gone. There's no way to be relatable. This tag is a little too niche, but
it is.
We have a combo farm where we've reached perfection.
Yeah.
Yes, if you play Stardew Valley, you know how many hours that means we've put into it. Good Lord. But you married Sebastian and then you divorced him, which was so scandalous, and then you married Shane. It was all crazy.
All crazy things.
But he is a real mess, that guy. I chose We Had to Remove This Post by Hannah Bervowitz. Do you remember that book?
Yeah, did you read that?
Yes.
Okay,
I read
for some
it
reason
either,
I don't remember that.
I think it was last year, actually. Yeah, I think it was last year. It was either this year or last year, but it's a bit of a mess. Like, it's like, it was, parts of it were interesting and good. The concept is that you follow a character who works at a moderation center. So her entire job is to like look at stuff that has been flagged basically on Facebook and be like, this is too violent to be shown. And then she'll delete it from the internet, or nope, this actually technically fits our requirements. So it's an interesting concept. And I think it's looking at an interesting part of our culture that we don't think about.
Yeah.
Like, when you flag stuff, part of it is AI, but also a lot of it is actual people having to look at the most violent stuff posted on the internet and then decide if it's allowed to be on the internet or not. And like, there's been these giant lawsuits between these people and Facebook and other, like Google and stuff, because they're like, this is the worst job imaginable. We're looking at the worst stuff imaginable. Yeah. So it's very terrible, but it's very interesting. However, the book was like, not really about that, and it was like sort of just about toxic relationships. The main character was garbage. It was actually pretty boring and very repetitive, and I ended up being really disappointed in the book. So there you go.
Well, my pick for this is something that most people probably wouldn't have even guessed that I've read, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. So this
spilling the tea, as they say.
So I read this book it would have been 2015 because I remember where I read it and where I lived at the time. So it was quite a long time ago. And so I was, a young person. I was like 19 or 20 or whatever. And I, at the time, didn't like it. And every time I think about it, I'm like, man, why do people like this book? And in my head, it is very much a mess because it's supposed to be like this romance fantasy book. But to me, the romance was just horrible and like not good. Like it was a very toxic, abusive type of setup for a relationship. And it was like, why is this being romanticized? And so to me, that's just a messy book. I don't even want to go near it. Don't like it. Anyway, next up, my girl Penny, the person I married most recently in Stardew Valley.
Ah, that's interesting.
A book that's quietly beautiful.
Easy. The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating by Elizabeth Tova Bailey. One of my favorite books that I've read in the last few years. A book I recommend a lot. It's a very short little book about a woman who has gotten a chronic illness. So she's bedbound a lot of the time. And a friend gives her a snail. And she just watches the snail. And so it's this like combination. It's like a meditative thought book about chronic illness and how your life can change and stuff like that. But it's also genuinely a deep dive on snails and like looking at she learns a lot about snails. And it's such a beautiful book. It's such a beautiful book. I really, really love it. It's a very strange little book, but it was really beautiful.
Very good. I have decided to pick After Dark by Haruki Murakami because what I like about this book is like the whole thing is set over the span of one night, and it starts at like midnight or something. Like the book starts when it's already the middle of the night, and so it's about that like quiet time between, say midnight and 5 a.m. or whatever, when the world is just a little bit different. And like you see things in a different light because things just like have this different vibe. And it's like a little bit surreal, but not like over the top surreal like Murakami can be. So it just has this kind of special vibe that just to me it was just gorgeous. I really, really loved that book. Next up, and this is one that you and I'm sure lots of other people will disagree on, but it's Sam. A book that grew on you. And I will say, he only grew on me after I married him.
Well,
you come to love him.
That's kind of funny. Like, you married him and then you're like, I'm sure I'll get to love him one day.
Well, I've decided to marry everyone in the game. Like, I want to marry everyone at least once. And I really loved marrying Sam because he's very funny. He loves to buy chairs online. And he'll just buy you'll just wake up in the morning and he's like, I bought another chair.
Honestly,
he's silly.
Extremely relatable to my life.
Yeah.
I've bought way too many chairs. I have just a chair sitting in my in my bedroom right now because I don't know where to put it.
Oh my god, you're literally Sam.
That's so funny. Yeah, what did I pick? Wait, Sam. Oh, I wrote My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Because this book was really interesting. I really liked it right away. I thought it was really interesting. But I totally gave it a 4 to 5 stars. Like, I was like, yeah, it's got some flaws. There's some problems with that book. I don't think it's a perfect book. But the more time has passed, the more I'm like, no, I can't stop thinking about it. And I think it's so interesting. And actually, have you read this? I just really like that book. So the longer time has passed, the more it's grown on me.
Oh, I love that. Okay. Mine was another slightly different angle. I chose A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara because I actually DNF'd it the first time I tried reading it. I read about 175-ish pages and I just found it to be so slow and I wasn't connecting to it at all. And so I put it down. I totally got rid of it. I was like, never going to read that again. And then a few years passed and I was like, you know what? I think I'm ready for it now. I think I'm ready to give it another try. And then I ended up loving it. So that was one that kind of like,
that's cool.
It grew on me from like 0 to 100 kind of way.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, Abigail. This one's easy. A book with a purple cover.
I picked In Memory of Memory by Maria Stepanova because it's the most purple book that I have.
Yeah.
It's very purple.
That is very purple, definitely.
Yeah.
I decided to go with Almond by Sun Wong Pyung. Because
that's very
it's very purple. Yeah. It's also very purple and a book that I totally recommend. Really liked that book when I read it a couple years ago.
Cool.
See, that was easy. Next up, Elliott. A book about a writer or writing.
I chose A Horse at Night by Amina Kane, which I just bought in New York a few weeks ago, and I'm really hyped on. Like, it is kind of funny, really, because I'm going for the gold with my classics goal. Yeah. So I basically won't read anything else normal for a while, quote unquote normal. Yeah. So I'm like dying to read this, but I just can't because I've got to read my classics.
That's so hardcore of you. I love that.
I know. I'm pretty hardcore these days. Yeah, I'm really excited to read this one. I eventually can.
There you go. I picked Beach Read by Emily Henry because that one is about two writers, and they're literally the whole book is about them trying to write books. So I feel like that really, really works for that one. And it's set on a beach, which Elliott also lives on a beach. So,
God, that's deep.
There you go. Next up, Maru.
I never understood why Elliott of all people lived on the beach. Like, I get that he literally explains. He's like, I wanted to like get away and live on a cabin, and I'm like, you're not a very beachy dude, though.
He's really not.
He's not a beachy dude. He has like very fancy hair and like a fancy coat jacket, and you're like, you would not hang out on the beach. Anyways.
Next up is Maru, a book that's smarter than you.
I picked Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I really enjoyed that book, but we didn't finish it. Connor and I were listening to it as an audiobook. Yeah. While we were on like some giant road trip. I don't remember. We were like driving from, I think we were probably driving from Kelowna to go see you or something. Yeah. Like, it was like we were driving a lot, and whenever we would drive, we would put it on. It was so interesting. Yeah. I learned so much from that book, but also it was like a lot of information was kind of flying over my head. It's such a long book. Never finished it. I was like, yep, Yuval Noah Harari knows a lot more than I do about the Homo sapiens. Yeah.
Fair enough. I just said anything by Kurt Vonnegut, which is funny that you mentioned Kurt Vonnegut earlier.
That is funny.
I feel like when I read his books, they just go straight over my head. Like, I feel like they're saying a lot, and I just like don't know enough about history and politics or whatever to like really understand what he's saying a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I just feel like, I feel like his books are smarter than me, and I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
I just don't read them anymore. Okay, next up is Haley, a book with a very pretty cover.
I picked Orwell's Roses by Rebecca Solnit because I do think that this is one of the prettiest books that I own.
It is very gorgeous.
An all red cover, but then everything else is kind of like a stamp. Or like the red is the stamp, but it just says Orwell's Roses, and then it's got a bunch of cutout roses, and then Rebecca Solnit. And I just think it's like, it's so beautiful. I think it's so beautiful.
It is really gorgeous.
I think printing it on brown paper was an inspire. Oh, it's not brown paper. It's printed brown paper. That's fascinating.
Wow.
Fascinating
Would you
decision.
look at that? Well, I decided to go with the Priory of the Orange Tree because every time I look at that cover, I'm just amazed by how much detail was put into the illustrations and the colors. It's a marvel. It is. That cover. My God. Next up, Emily, a character who loves arts and crafts.
I really struggled with this one, actually.
Yeah, it was a hard question.
I don't think I got a good answer. I just chose Anne from Anne of Green Gables. She isn't specifically into arts and crafts, but like, I just remember one of the faux pas that she does in the book is that she like is obsessed with shoving flowers everywhere, and she puts a lot of flowers into her hat, and everyone thinks she looks really stupid. So and she's like
a silly little artsy gal.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's accurate. I can't think of another one.
Yeah, that's fair. I went with Molly Weasley because she loves to knit.
True. Not bad. That's interesting.
You know? Yeah, it's not my strongest question, but I couldn't think of anything else for Emily other than a quirky book, and that just seemed boring. Okay. Yeah. Next up is Alex, a book about sports.
A character. What about a book that would have blue hair?
A book that would have blue.
Like yeah, okay, that's one.
Yeah, that's a good alternate.
Anyway, alternate question. Out loud. They're just thinking out loud.
But next up is Alex, a book about sports.
Yeah, I was gonna play cool, but then I was like, why? I was gonna do Albatross. Yeah. But you know what? No, I got this one. I got The Art of Fielding by Chad Harback. I chose this one because I haven't read it. I haven't read it yet, and so I thought it'd be fun to not do Albatross.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many
I
other
was going to talk about Albatross, which is about golf, but this book is about baseball. What about you?
I decided to go with Bear Town by Frederick Bachman, which is about hockey. Yeah. I mean, but it's what I love about it is it's not just about hockey. I mean, with any sports book that's like about a team, it's about the people and like the camaraderie and the brotherhood and like.
Because Albatross is not about golf.
No, it's not
really not. And I'm sure this really isn't about baseball. Like, I don't know. Have you read this one?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, maybe. I'm sure that it's about, it says, as the season counts down to its climactic final game, these 5 are forced to confront their deepest hopes, anxieties, and secrets. In the process, they forge new bonds and help one another find their true paths. It's like, exactly, it's not really about the baseball, is it? It's about the
baseball is
the
just
teammates.
that's how they know each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just met it.
Yeah.
Baseball.
All right, we're near the end here. So next up is Leah, a book set in the woods.
I chose The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly by Sun Mi Huang. I really remember that this had the woods a lot. Am I wrong? I don't think so. First of all, it's got the woods on the cover.
That's true. That's interesting.
But secondly, now I'm looking at the description and it says that her plan to escape into the wild. So I do really think that there's a forest element.
That makes sense. She was on a farm, but then she escaped.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So basically this is about a hen who is really depressed because she is always having her eggs stolen and she really, really wants to have a baby, but they're always stealing her eggs. God, that's so sad.
It really is.
Jesus Christ. Let's not think too deeply about that. So, not right now, not on this podcast in this moment, but basically she's like, I'm going to run away and have my baby. So she runs away and I really remember her running through the woods for a while.
Sense.
And eventually,
based on the cover.
Just so you know, she does have her baby. Oh God, I'm getting emotional. Let's move on. What's yours book?
Okay, the book I picked is If You Find Me by Emily Murdoch, which I don't know if I've ever talked about this book on the podcast, but it's a book I read also in 2015. I remember it back to the same living room. But it was such a good and fascinating book. It's basically about this teenage girl who has a younger sister who's quite a lot younger than her, if I remember correctly. And 10 years prior, their mom kidnapped them and furrowed them away in the woods. So basically they've lived in the woods pretty much their entire life and in this really weird living situation. And then the book kind of takes off when they get discovered out there and their lives kind of get turned upside down. But it's a lot of it is set in the woods because they just live out in the woods.
Spooky.
So yeah, spooky but very good book. Okay, the final one, and yes, this is kind of a marriageable character, but kind of not, because you can invite him to be your roommate. So I decided to include him. Krobus, my favorite little guy, Krobus, a book by a reclusive author.
I chose True Grit by Charles Portis, one of my favorite reads of the year, perhaps my favorite read of the year. You'll find that out in our final episode of the year. But I'm obsessed with this book, and the author was quite reclusive. He wrote a handful of books in his time, but he really didn't do a lot of interviews, never went. He was not the type of author who would have an Instagram or that is public facing. Was I'm writing my books, I'll publish them, I hope you like them, I'll respect, but I want to be left alone. And it was very kind of reclusive.
There you go. Well, I decided to go with The Catcher in the Rye because J.D. Salinger was also a recluse. And apparently, specifically after Catcher in the Rye came out, he went hardcore into being no, I don't want to talk to anyone, because the book was so big that I think it probably overwhelmed him a bit. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. So yeah, well, that's the tag.
That was a lot of fun, Raylene. Thank you so much for putting that together, because I actually had a lot of fun picking all these books.
Yay.
We really hope that you guys enjoyed the tag and our just deep discussion on A Clockwork Orange.
That was we've never talked about a book quite as much as we talked about.
No, I don't think we have. Yet again, if you want to participate in our reader survey, it's linked down below. We'd love for you to make your voice heard so that we know what the community is reading.
Yes.
And we will talk to you in our next episode. Bye.
Bye.